This afternoon we celebrate the feast of St. Peter Claver. And sometimes the lives of the saints are so fantastic that they're like homilies in their own right. So I'm just going to kind of do that today and just share about St. Peter Claver's life. And I hope you'll see along with me that it's really worthy of being shared. So St. Peter Claver was born in Spain in the year 1580. And when he was about 20 years old, he decided to join the Jesuit order and become a priest. So as a Spanish Jesuit, he had the option. He could stay and serve as a priest in Spain, or he could go to the New World and serve on mission in Colombia as a Jesuit priest preaching the gospel in the New World. At this point, they had just discovered America only about 100 years ago. So this was very, very fresh. And so St. Peter Claver decided to go to the New World. So he arrives in Colombia as a young man in the port city of Cartagena. And he is disgusted by what he sees, because what he finds there is that daily there are ship upon ship carrying African slaves from Africa, right? That what the Europeans are doing at this period is they are, as we well know, right, kidnapping Africans from their homes, forcing them on boats, and bringing them as slaves to the New World. And they treated these Africans so poorly, right? These were like able-bodied men and women. They were bringing them over for work, right? These able-bodied men and women were treated so poorly that a third of them died on the boat trip over, right? And many of them arrived in Cartagena severely malnourished, severely sick, severely dehydrated, and confused, because their slave traders were lying to them and tricking them and saying, when you arrive at the New World, they're going to be monsters that eat you and you're going to die and this and that. So these poor people arrive in a land they know nothing about, in the most terrible conditions, terrified for their lives. And nobody is seeming to help them. And Peter Claver, as a young priest, is there, and he's scandalized, and he's horrified by what's going on, and he decides to do something about it. So what he does is every day he goes to the port and he stands on the docks and he meets the slave ships as they come in. And he begins to treat and care for and love and minister to all the Africans arriving on the boat. He's bringing them food. He's bringing them medicine. He's bringing them lemons and oranges because they haven't had vitamin C for months, right? He's caring for these people. He is explaining to them what's about to happen to them. So he's giving them tips, and he's telling them how to live and how to survive in this new world. And as he's doing this, he's also sharing the gospel to these people, right? He's preaching about Jesus Christ. He's telling them about the forgiveness of their sins, and he's helping these people come to terms with the new reality that they have just literally landed on. St. Peter Claver does this for decades of his life. Every day, going out to meet the ships, preaching, ministering to, and serving the people who arrive there. And having done this for decades, they estimate that St. Peter Claver himself personally baptized 300,000 people. Himself baptized 300,000 people. And then, during the off-season, when the ships weren't coming anymore from Africa, he would then go into the country, and he would visit the slaves on their plantations, on their farms, and he would encourage them, and he would minister to them because they were now Christians, and he would hear their confessions, and he would say Mass for them, and he would make sure that they were receiving as best treatment as he possibly could. And he refused to sleep in the houses of the plantation owners, but he slept in the slave quarters with the slaves, which in the 1600s, as a Jesuit priest, as a Westerner, was never done. It was a shocking thing. And he was the thorn in the side of the civil authorities in Colombia for years. They detested him because he was pointing out and showing the injustice in their midst that they were perpetuating, and he was doing something about it. For decades, he lived his life daily, committing himself in service and charity to these poor African people. Having done this for several decades, at the end of his life, he becomes very ill, and he's bedridden. And his Jesuit order then puts a former slave in charge of caring for him. And for years, this former slave mistreats him, and starves him, and beats him, and physically abuses him. And St. Peter Claver never says a thing about it. And when they finally find out, and they say, Peter, why didn't you say anything? He says that he considered that those abuses, those evils were just punishment for his sins. What a man that is. I just think, what a man. Like, he could be so entitled that after all those literally decades of serving people, he could sit and receive injustice like them in silence. He could sit and receive abuse, mistreatment, evil in silence, right? Out of a willingness to love, out of a willingness to give himself to our Lord. What is it that allows a man to do all that when nobody else is doing it? He doesn't have to do this at all. What is it that causes St. Peter Claver to do the incredible things that he does? I don't actually really know, but I believe it's something that our gospel talks about this afternoon, right? Of removing the splinter in my own eye so that I can, removing the wooden beam in my own eye so that I can remove the splinter in my brother's eye. Right? St. Peter Claver himself experienced his own poverty. He experienced his own emptiness and need before our Lord Jesus Christ, and embracing that poverty, right? Living as a disciple of Christ and enriched by that poverty, he could then go and serve, love, and heal others in their own poverty. Right? He removed the wooden beam from his own eye so that he could serve others as well. Enriched by his own poverty, embracing it, living it out day by day, he could then love and serve others in their poverty. At this Mass, at this altar, we can go before our Lord in our own poverty, in our own hunger, in our own need for him. Right? And doing so, becoming rich, becoming satisfied, becoming completely strengthened by a reliance not upon ourselves, but upon his love and his goodness. We can imitate St. Peter Claver, even here and now, even in tiny ways, so that we can imitate that great saint of whom the words of St. Paul could be applied just as well as anybody else in human existence. Although I am free in regard to all, I have made myself a slave to all, so as to win over as many as possible. I have become all things to all to save at least some. All this I do for the sake of the gospel, so that I too may have a share in it.